Hey, everybody. Thanks for being back with us. Thanks for coming back to join us after the holidays. Hope they were good for you and yours. We are starting a new chapter in this new year as we move into the 10th chapter, the Gospel of John. Some of these words are going to, I think if you've been around church much, and there's no value in that, but if you have, I think that you will find these words familiar. Let me start and read for about 10 verses or so, and we'll come back and we'll talk these through. This is Jesus talking. I tell you the truth. Anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they didn't understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. In this chapter, at least in the early part of this chapter, we get Jesus using the shepherding metaphor, which is known in the church and I think is beloved, maybe more so what we will run in tomorrow. We have said a couple of times that one of the distinctives of the Gospel of John are these 7 moments where Jesus says, I am, and then gives himself a title. And here we get, I am the gate. This is the third that we've seen so far as we've moved through the gospel. To get there, Jesus uses this idea essentially from the sheep's perspective. I don't know that he asked people to do that, Michael, but if you read this carefully, I think that the one way to get in touch with this passage is to say, from the sheep's perspective, there are 2 choices. There is a person who can be trusted and a person who cannot be trusted. The person who can be trusted is up front, calls the sheep by name, knows them, has their best interest at heart. The person who cannot be trusted is a thief, is a liar, is dishonest, comes in not through the gate, but sneaks in and tries to steal, take the sheep away. Now, obviously the backdrop for this is Jesus and his enemies, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, who are, in the language of the text, bad shepherds. They are thieves. They are not the ones who have the best interest of the sheep in mind. It's an interesting metaphor for us, I think, Michael, because though we live in an area that is agricultural, the idea of shepherding is a little bit foreign.
Right.
But I still think in many ways these are some of the beloved images. Less so I am the gate. I don't know if you ask people for their favorite statements of Jesus, I don't know where that one would fall. My guess is maybe a little lower. But Jesus is saying something pretty significant here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned context. I think it's worth taking a moment here to just bring ourselves back to speed. That's kind of the crazy thing. You might be watching this months, maybe even years after the initial recording. So you may have just hit next video from the last study. But if you're with us as we're doing this live, you might a couple weeks ago have forgotten that the thing that precedes this is the Pharisees, the leaders, the people who would be the spiritual shepherds of the people. They are the ones who are asking, we're not blind, are we? And Jesus then immediately in the Gospel of John rolls into chapter 10, verse 1 here, and makes a very, very, very strong statement, Clint. Not just blindness, as in going without sight, also claiming that there is this connection to the thief and the bandit who sneaks in another way. Make no mistake about it, that's a substantial charge against those who would claim for themselves spiritual authority, who would certainly claim to be the keepers of the people. And here, Jesus, he does not beat around the bush at all. He calls that out with ill intent. He says that this is ultimately not for the sake of the sheep. And in fact, Jesus says the sheep haven't even listened. They're not even responding to the care of the shepherd. And so here, as you look towards the back end of this passage, Jesus then transitions into this gate language. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, Clint. I think that this is tough language for a modern person to process. And I think a quick word of probably caution would be to not underestimate how powerful of a claim that this is, that there's only one way in to the sheep, that there's only one path that is truly the right path, and it's the path through the center. It's through the gate, and Jesus is claiming to be the one who stands at that center. That's a very, very strong claim to be first, to be highest, to be the first mover, and Jesus is claiming that for himself here. Now, I think you could debate all day long about what the implications of that are, but just on its surface, Jesus's claim here is clear that he is the gate by which all the sheep must enter, and the only gate, meaning that those who get to the sheep from other pastures or through other ways, they are not coming through the first order. They're coming as thieves and bandits, and that their actions will therefore prove who they are.
I think you have to be a little careful to build literalism into this story. I don't know a great deal about sheep, but the implication here, especially in the front part of the text, is that the sheep know the difference between the good shepherd or the true shepherd and the false shepherds, the shepherd and the thieves. And I think that's a lot of credit to give sheep. I don't actually know if that's accurate. I'm sure there's some sense in which sheep come to be familiar with the person who's with them the most. However, don't think for a moment that Jesus is trying to tell us a farm story. If you remember this entire 8th and 9th chapters of John, and if you haven't been with us through those, you might want to go back and pick them up. It was moment after moment of calling people to make a decision. They have to make a choice what they believe about Jesus. The crowds, the Pharisees, even the disciples have to decide, who is this man? That's the driving question of the narrative. And now Jesus is saying that the sheep know the difference. The true sheep, they follow the true shepherd. And think about what's the purpose of a gate, right? Whether it's to go into the safety of the pen or whether it's to go out to water and pasture. The idea is by passing through the gate, one is able to go where they need to be and do what is best for them. And in that sense, Jesus says, I am the gate. I'm the way in. I'm the way out. I'm the way to safety. I'm the way to refreshment and nurture. We already saw I am living water. I am the spring of life. We've seen that language, and now we see it again in a very different picture, a very different image. But Jesus again saying, I am the way, in this case, in a very earthy kind of illustration.
And that's actually the jumping point I want to take here just very briefly, Clint. So don't miss this. This is at its core a very simple and, in Jesus's day, very relatable story. The idea that there are shepherds, the idea that someone is going to tend that gate and letting some in, some out, the idea that there are bandits and thieves. These are not novel ideas. These are very common economic lived realities of people. This is the world in which Jesus lives. So on its very base level, I think this story operates in a very simplistic form. It is not complicated. It's not academic. It connects with people's experience. But don't let that to your point, don't let that sort of lull you into a false sense of simplicity in what Jesus is teaching here. And that's what makes this story and Jesus's particular teaching edge throughout the Gospel of John so incredibly powerful is it can be delivered to the most common person in society. It does not require special tools or frameworks to be able to understand it, except for the fact that the people who should most readily understand it, and we've said this over and over again, they so readily misunderstand it or don't understand it at all. And here we get that said explicitly when Jesus uses this figure of speech in verse 6. They don't understand what he's saying to them. So even though Jesus is using this very accessible form of teaching, the people who should be experts at understanding the spiritual lesson completely misunderstand that they don't connect to what Jesus is teaching them. I think that that is one of the consistent themes through John, showing that Jesus is, yes, the word, but the word not in some kind of highfalutin or some kind of very inaccessible form. Rather, it's almost so accessible and so understandable that if you're expecting it to be something else, you won't be able to understand it where it comes. There's a kind of amazing gift in seeing Jesus with that tension held together, Clint, because even in our own day, some people are want to make Jesus into a PhD professor, and some want everything that Jesus says to just be simple, literal words that you take, and people are confused why Jesus is calling himself a gate, right? Isn't he a person? No, Jesus is always in the Gospel of John doing this amazing combination of teaching that's accessible while it being clouded and hard to process for the very people who should have the skills and training and ability to understand what he's saying.
We've seen throughout the Gospel of John so far this interplay or this tension between those who are in and those who are out. And we've seen that from the Samaritan woman at the well. We've seen that in the last chapter from the man who had been blind. We've seen the religious leaders accuse people or label people as outsiders. We've seen them level that charge against Jesus. And so the theme of who is inside and who is outside has been already, I think, fairly prominent in this book. And think literally for a moment, what does a gate do? A gate is a doorway by which one goes from out to in. And what's Jesus saying? That if you want to be in, it's not about the temple, and it's not about the sacrifice, and it's not about self-righteousness, and it's not about ethnicity. It is about coming to Jesus. I am the gate. I am the way in. And so then by definition, who are left out? Those who won't come to Jesus, those who refuse to engage Jesus as the Messiah, those who refuse to listen to the truth and the teaching of Jesus, they keep themselves on the outside. And because they're outsiders, because they stand outside the fold, they're a danger to the sheep because they don't know the right way to lead them. They're lost themselves. And so the true sheep know not to give them heed, not to follow them. And I think, again, I don't know anyone. I'm sure they're out there. I don't know anyone who would say of the 7 I am statements, I'm the gate is my favorite. But there's a lot here, a lot of layers, a lot of nuance.
I agree with you, Clint. I don't think many people would, though I think it is shocking how many people do know and love the very final verse of this section that we've read. The thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And that word abundantly here means exceedingly, over and above what you could possibly imagine. It's a very, very strong emphasis kind of word. And Clint, I think what is amazing about a passage like this is the diversity of interpretations, and it all hinges on what you think Jesus is saying here by life, right? It's all defined by that word, because if you define life as a particular kind of lived life, right? A wealthy life or a healthy life, or you think of a adventurous life or whatever you might fill into that, then this text sort of gives you legs that you can run with that. You can say, well, Jesus is going to give me whatever this thing that I desire, and it's going to be abundant. It's going to be exceeding. It's going to be flowing over, right? But here's the thing. It's gonna be tempered by tomorrow immediately how Jesus is gonna move into, talking about what the shepherd is willing to give up for the sheep, so come back for that. But also, I just wanna point out, the life here is biological life. The word here is lived life, and I think, Clint, one thing that we forget maybe, 21st century, a lot of us here in the Western world reading a text like this is every day we're given our daily bread. The idea that Jesus Christ is going to give you a life that is full, not just a life that's full of what your stomach needs today, but a life that is full unto eternity, a life that extends beyond the horizon that we can see. The claim that Jesus is making here has cosmic significance, and he is making it as a person who says it's not just about, that you follow this new teaching plan or this new spiritual meditation guide. No, Jesus is claiming the way to life that overflows outside of not just live life and the things that we need for today, but life that leads into an eternity. That kind of life can only be found if one goes through the gate, who is Jesus Christ himself. It is a claim that God in Jesus Christ has done something that cannot be gone around. And that is a strong, strong claim for Jesus to make. And it's paired with this amazing promise. And I think that that's John showing us that that's what's at stake here. Either we listen to Jesus or we don't. And the thing that stands along that way is the gate, the choice of will you go through it to pasture or will you not? And ultimately, Jesus' strong words against the Pharisees and any false teacher would be that the moment you become a thief or a robber, right, then you become the enemy. You become the one outside the bounds of God's plan.
I think one of the unfortunate developments of this beloved verse is that at times in the church's life we have put the emphasis on the word abundantly, and so we've tried to make this a verse about having a lot. At its worst, this verse has been used by people to advocate that God wants you to have a new house and a new car and an airplane, whatever that might be. The idea that the point is the abundance, but I don't think you can read this text that way in the Gospel of John. For John, Jesus brings life, and he brings not just regular life, but supreme life, beautiful, wonderful, gifted life. I have come. Why is Jesus here? That the sheep, that the followers, that people would have life, and that they would have it in abundance, that they would have more life than they could know what to do with. And I think when we, I just think when we have fallen into the temptation to make this a materialistic verse, man, I think we're doing something with it that I personally don't think was John's intention at all.
Yeah, I also think it withholds something from us, Clint. I think because when we think about this verse as being contained by the things that we might be able to possess, we fail to see how distant and far and wide that vision that God has for life, way beyond our human capacity for it. And you're going to see that tension once again. Join us for the study tomorrow because right now Jesus is talking about abundant life. The next thing he's going to move to is the fact that he's going to give up divine life for the sake of those who are the sheep. And so there's this turning on its head. If we make this about what we have and having more of it, an abundant increase within our lives, we are no doubt going to miss the vast horizon, way more than the stuff that we could ever possess, to actual God's intention for the creation that God gave life to. And so yeah, this is an amazing image, but one that we can be tempted by nature, some of the things that take top precedence in culture, to make Jesus say a thing that he had no intention of saying. And I certainly think you'd make the case that John had no intention of passing along. And in doing so, I think we actually miss the richness of the teaching. So stick with us. There's more to come, but we're certainly glad to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Good to be back with you and hope to see you tomorrow.